Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Jared, for the introduction. Thank you, Workbench, for inviting me to talk. So my name is Vivian. I'm a visual artist and data scientist. And as Jared said, I work at Doctors Without Borders as a communications officer. We are a humanitarian aid organization that delivers medical care to people in crises-affected areas. And my talk today is called The Feels, which sounds kind of like a therapy session. And I will ask you to share your feelings with me, but I promise I won't bill you for my time afterwards. I'm going to start by showing you a couple of photographs. And when you look at these, I want you to think about what emotions or feelings you might come across. Do you feel happy, sad, angry, frustrated, anything? Okay, do you want to shout out some of the emotions that you felt? Any thoughts? Sad? Yeah. Anything else? I heard laughter in the first one, so kind of happiness, hope. Anything? Okay, so those are very distinct and clear feelings that you get from these photographs. Now I'm going to show you two visualizations and graphics, and I want you to do the same thing. If you can't read that text, it says, families fleeing violence. There are nearly 4 million Syrian refugees in 5 host countries. More than 15 million people are in need of assistance inside and outside Syria. Here's the next one. The text says, 77% of people with DRTB don't get effective treatment. Of the 23% that do, only half are cured. So any thoughts or feelings this time around? Not so much, right? So it's harder to get feelings from graphics compared to photos. And I know for me especially, it's not as obvious or as immediate how to feel after I see these visuals. At work, I see photos like this all the time. And my job is to transform them into visualizations or graphics, maps, animations that show the macro level of data. And as you know through the exercise that we just did, all the emotions get stamped out in this process. You might be thinking that data is objective and numbers are supposed to be kind of agnostic, so why do emotions even matter? I believe that emotions or feelings are a very powerful tool to provoke change. They can inspire people to take action with us, and at the end of the day, that's what we're all trying to do. We want them to sign a petition, to share our content, or to buy our products. And so as content producers, we should all strive to create graphics that leave our viewers feeling something. This idea came to me when I was working on a graphic on a report that we just released. It's on the 5-year anniversary of the Syrian war. So we released data on our projects of the number of hospitals and civilians bombed throughout the course of this war. And my tolerance for sad news is pretty high, given where I work. But when I read this report, it broke my heart. And it was the one time where I felt happy that I had a very short turnaround time. I had 2 hours to make something, and it kept me going through. And this is what I came up with. Overall, I like this graphic. I think it's easy on the eyes. I'm happy I got it turned around in time, and I think it's effective in showing a summary of the report. I later learned that this graphic was printed and hand-delivered to the UN Special Envoy of the Syrian conflict. And he only got this graphic. He didn't get the rest of the 13 pages of report for context. And I had this moment where I thought, is it possible that a graphic could change the trajectory of the war? And all I can think about was, I wish those feelings and that crippling sadness I felt while making this graphic came through on the final visualization, because maybe then we would have had a deeper impact. And I know I'm dreaming here, right? Like, this graphic isn't going to change the war. But it made me believe that every content we create has an opportunity to influence someone's decisions. So how do we create something that leaves a lasting impression? I've been thinking about how to do this through this concept of mapping data to our senses. And all credit for this idea goes to my former professors, Keyur Patel and Rachel Schutt. They posed this idea in our data science course, and I've been obsessed with it ever since. Because this is how we naturally take in information in our day-to-day lives, right? We rely on these 5 senses, our touch, smell, taste, sound, and vision, to absorb data from the outside world, process it, and help us navigate our lives. So it only makes sense then to make visualizations that are easily and readily received by these 5 senses. I'm going to talk about this in 2 realms. So our physical space and digital. And I assume that most of us create in digital space, so for that reason, I'm not going to speak on taste and smell specifically. But if you ever have physical space to play with, there's so much you can do with these senses because they are the strongest triggers of our memories. Sight is, included in all visualization work, so I want to leave that one aside as well. And I'll start by talking about sound. Sound is so effective at evoking emotions. Just think about watching a scary movie without sound effects. It probably won't be that scary. And there aren't that many examples of this, but I found a couple that I really like. This one visualizes feeling the crunch of the deadline. So each of these bars is a team member, and below it is a calendar from day 1 to 20. The bubbles that drop are correlate to like 1 commit for each of the team members. And as you can imagine, they kind of slow starting in the beginning, and then once you get closer to the deadline, the bubbles drop more frequently. I want to turn on the sound now for you to listen to this. And you'll notice that some of the bubbles are bigger, and that correlates to how many files were modified and changed within each commit. It's pretty cute. So as someone who procrastinates, I really feel anxious listening and watching this because I can relate to the feeling of being so close to a deadline and I only have like 10% of my project completed. It's like a mad dash. Everyone's going. Okay, so this is great, right? Everyone's like laughing and you're happy about it. But it's funny because the title is like feeling the crunch, right? And so I would argue that they could choose a more obnoxious sound, something that really gets under the skin if you want people to feel anxious. But maybe they wanted people to feel happy and laugh that, we're not the only procrastinators in the room. So it's really effective at showing that layer of information. This next example is also really fun. It visualizes different sorting algorithms. So the visuals, I think, are stunning, but the sound really makes this video. I'm only going to play you 2. Okay, I think the sound is really effective at giving character to each of these sorting algorithms. And it also helps you realize very quickly which type sorts faster, right? And I feel like we felt happiness while watching this. It's very nostalgic, that sound. I can almost imagine these little 8-bit robots, competing to sort algorithms. It's really fun. So sound is really cool. If you want to explore more and see how to play with sound in your visualizations, here's a list of websites that I use. I used to work at a gaming company, so we have to find sound effects and sound clips all the times, and these are really good resources to look for that. So next I want to talk about touch. And touch is super cool because even in the digital space, you can engage users in their physical space. So think about all the actions we take on our computers, right? You can click, scroll, drag, hold, release, swipe. There's so much we can play with here. And there's a lot of hype these days around making visualizations interactive. But sometimes I find that interactions are distracting if they don't serve a purpose. So what can we do to enhance these interactions? My inspiration comes from physics-based games because they're really good at creating this user experience. Just think about how frustrating it is to drag something from one side of the screen to the next when it's weighted with gravity. Or if you lose the game because you release the object at the wrong time, right? Just think about Flappy Bird. It's really good at making you feel frustrated and happy at the same time. So I want to walk through 2 case studies about how I try to build this interaction into our designs. Here's a graphic that I made 3-4 years ago on how many pills it takes to cure someone with DRTB, also known as drug-resistant tuberculosis. So it takes 14,600 pills over the course of 2 years. I made this before I knew how to code, so that literally meant copy and pasting 1 pill vector 14,000 times in Illustrator, and my computer was so slow, it was chugging the whole time, and by the time I was finished creating this graphic, I was so frustrated and just infuriated. I thought, there has to be a better way to do this. And I realized, this must be similar to the frustration that people with DRTB feel, to have to go through all of this treatment and only come out with a 50% chance of surviving. This is another example where the feelings I felt while making this didn't come through in the final graphic. And I think because it's so easy to scroll down, right? Scrolling down is very intuitive. You get to the bottom, like 2 seconds, tell you how many pills. Okay, great. So how can we create something that's a little bit more frustrating for the viewer? I thought, what if we made people scroll right? Scrolling right is not intuitive. I made this in Mike Malecki's class. He's sitting right there. So you have to scroll right, and to get little factoids, right? Each of these circles represents a pill. And for example, it takes 2 gallons of water to swallow this many pills. What other neurotic side effects will you get? You have a possibility of going deaf throughout this treatment. And so you keep scrolling, and you get to this point where you're halfway. It's kind of annoying, but it's just as annoying to go backwards as it is to go forward, so you might as well keep going. And this frustration and internal dialogue is designed and created to put the viewer in a situation that gives you just a sliver of what that frustration is like, to live with DRTB and not have the most effective treatments. My next example comes back to my Sierra graphic. This is a part of the report that really got to me. It's called this double tap strategy, which means striking a location once, and then within 20 to 60 minutes of the first strike, the same location gets hit again. That's usually how long it takes for first responders to arrive on site. So medical doctors, nurses, and humanitarian workers will come on site to help, and then they're killed or they're wounded as a result of the second attack. This is a very deliberate design. It's created to maximize the number of casualties. And it's shocking to me the intent behind this kind of strategy. I wanted to see how we can visualize this intent. Here is another version of the same data. So In the target is the location and the date of the attack. There are the 2 timestamps for each attack. You can see how close they are to each other. And on the side is a simple histogram, the number of people wounded and the number of people killed. The user is prompted to click on the target, and that gives you data from the first attack. Around 100 people injured and around 20 people killed. When you click on the target again, it adds the data from the second attack, and you can see the numbers are almost doubled. You can argue that this stacked histogram is sufficient enough to give the same story message, and it might be. For this example, I really wanted to play with giving the user control of when that second layer of information is delivered. It allows the user to see it in a linear timeline, which is how these attacks happen in real life. And it also gives them time to really understand the context and absorb the information so that they get the impact. By having the users click twice on the same target, we're creating this parallel of the control and intent that goes behind designing this kind of attack. Working with this kind of data is a little bit tricky. Anytime you have sensitive or patient kind of information, because you don't want to go overboard with the effects. Like I could have had bodies coming out or bombing sounds or something like that. And it's hard. It's a very hard balance, trying to go overboard with your effects, that it just becomes sensationalist, compared to having the right amount of emotions so that you keep your users engaged and they want to continue to explore more of your information. I don't have the answers to this. It's a very hard balance. We go through it all the time at work, but it's just something to think about as you create visualizations with emotions. And that brings me to my last point. Now you have users feeling all these emotions, so you have a responsibility to leave them with a takeaway. Give them a story message. What is going on here? What's your best at, what this means, and especially what this means for the future? Kaiser Feng, who's the author of Junk Charts, says, "We are in the decision-making business. Our jobs are to help people make decisions." So let's create visualizations that evoke emotions and also leave them with a story message on what to do. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Hope you got the feels. I'm not done. One more slide. But please come say hi throughout the day. I'd love to hear you. And one more plug. We are asking Pfizer and GSK to lower the price of the pneumonia vaccine. If you want to take action with us, please sign our petition. I'd appreciate it. Thank you.